coach or a T-ball coach or a church leader or a selectman or a town mayor, we ask you all to find a way to volunteer to your local communities or to your state that you live in as a way of giving back for the privilege of living here. This is how we were raised. This is what we gave back. We never got paid for any of this work we did on the old man, and I'm not sure you could pay me enough money. You try, but I'm not sure you can pay me enough money. What I'd like to do is try to answer questions for everybody, and a little while later.
Was it ice in the water that eventually brought it down?
Yeah, we believe that the natural freezing and thawing cycle that occurred in Franconian Notch, the rock that made up his Adam's apple, or the keystone, was actually split down the middle. So we figured that at some point in time that winter, the water had gotten so great in his face that it caused just enough pressure outwardly so that the keystone fell. When that fell, the layers 1, 2, 3, 4 fell right after. Probably in a matter of seconds. There are 3 turnbuckles that stick out over in midair now. The 4th turnbuckle came completely off and landed in the debris field below his face, where his face was. I located that shortly after the incident happened. We had it removed by a helicopter. So now if you go to the Profile Plaza, where the Old Man Museum is, you can see the turnbuckle. It's actually secured to the ground. And you can see that's a 3.5-inch solid steel turnbuckle that looks like a pretzel now. Huge pressure.
How many times a year did you go up there?
We used to go up in late May and see how we wintered, depending on the weather and that type of stuff. We were actually planning, I wanted to get the hiring of my replacement out of the way, and then I was going to do that year's work. We were going to go to the Old Man probably in a week or 2 after, except that it happened. And then from that May visit, I would determine if we needed 2 days or 3 days work. And then we would usually do that the last week in July. And then frequently just my wife and I would go up in the fall for a fun hike and put him to bed for the winter.
So can you describe the state of the old man in the mountain now?
Now, if this is a replica, and if you were to take this crack here that runs down through his face right here, everything from here forward is gone. So there is no profile left. Yeah. When one of the things that we decided the day the Old Man developed was that we were going to ask people what they wanted to do. So we put out a call to anybody and everybody that lived in New Hampshire that had an opinion, and gotta believe there was a few, and asked them what they thought, what did they want to see happen. Did they want to see it rebuilt? Did they want to see it left alone? The 2 main questions we were looking for. Over 90% of the people who responded did not want it rebuilt. Only a small percentage of people wanted it rebuilt. We then went to the next phase and said, okay, if we rebuilt it, how much would that cost? And in 2001 dollars, it was going to cost around $3 million. Plus, you're going to have to get somebody foolish enough to drill into that rock, and that wasn't me. My family was dead set against rebuilding. It was created naturally, survived naturally, passed away naturally, and that's what we think the way it should be done.
I like the metal profile.
Thank you. Actually, that idea came as part of this process. We said, how are we going to let people know what it looked like? There are going to be generations of people that have never seen it. An artist came to us and said, there's a process if you line up the rocks one beyond the other, that you can actually see a profile. So they created this device here. And early on we said, we can sell a ton of these things. We can make all kinds of money because everybody and their brother can go to the lake and can look up like this and see the old man on the mountain. Somebody thought it looked like a gun, and that goes that way.
In the course of the video, it looked like your tie was being worn by the governor in the video.
It's actually being worn by my dad.
That was your father, okay.
Yep, there were two that were made. A gentleman, friend of my dad's, carved them. The one that my dad was wearing went with my dad, and this is mine. After my dad passed away in 2002, we actually buried his ashes in the old man's left eye. It was his wishes to be with the old man. The old man fell the next spring, so he's still with the old man. Anybody else?
Do you know where the rocks ended up? Like where did the space land?
Specifically, we can't tell which of those rocks in that rock slide are. I was able to find one rock that's probably 6 or 7 feet tall and that wide, very large rock. And I know that was part of the brow of the old man because of some of the indentations and some of the things that were left in the rock where it landed. That landed in the debris field and rolled toward the bicycle path and nearly got to the bicycle path before it stopped. It's still there. So the rest of the stuff, we recovered some things from the debris field, but by and large you couldn't tell. Most of the rocks were shattered, very small.
Is that what the rocks are?
That's what some of those rocks are, yep. When my dad at one point in time became part of the legislature in the late 90s, he was successful in getting a bill passed which said that the state of New Hampshire would pay for maintenance to the old man of the mountain, which is really kind of scary. First of all, they did not have a line item budget for the old man of the mountain until the late 1990s, having been discovered in 1805. And they give us a whopping $2,500 every 2 years. Basically what happened is my dad, anytime he needed supplies, he would build them to the bridge he was working on and call his boss up and say, "You're going to wonder why we have epoxy on the bridge or we need shovels or whatever." He didn't hide it. He always told his boss. His boss was in favor of it. So indirectly the state did pay for it. But not everybody knew about it. Yes, ma'am?
So what do you actually see today?
You actually just see a pile of rocks on the mountain. It looks like it's got kind of a goofy haircut with 3 big things sticking out the end of it. That's it. You see no resemblance of a face on the mountain.
And is there a way to see the silhouette?
If you go to Profile Lake, okay, you go to what's called the Profile Plaza, which is down near the water, you'll see 3 big aluminum things standing up. They look just like that. You walk over and it says if you're 4 feet tall, stand here. If you're 5 feet tall, stand, and you stand where you are, and you look along those profilers, and you will actually see the old man's face on the mountain again.
How did your father make the transition from civil engineering and working with bridges to then dealing with homes exclusively a granite slab and such?
He did it only as a hobby. He still built bridges. He still worked for the state of New Hampshire. My dad was a self-taught. I never realized that my dad didn't have a high school diploma until after he was 45 years old. He never went to college. All the engineering skills that were needed to build a bridge, he learned practically, hands-on, at building bridges. Simply by the fact that he was responsible for building or rebuilding state-owned bridges from Lincoln north to the Canadian border. When the state decided that they wanted to start taking care of the old man, they said, "Well, your bridge crew is in the area, and you like working in the heights. How would you like to go see Austin Macaulay and start taking care of the old man?" That's pretty much how it happened.
If you're on my tour yesterday, we talked a lot about this local group of women who helped raise a lot of money to help save Franconia Notch. Can you elaborate on the importance of women, and specifically your wife Deb, taking care of the old man?
The General Federated Women's Clubs decided that one of their projects was going to be saving Franconia Notch. Because at the time the foresting was so bad, they had pretty much stripped the mountain of trees, valley of trees. So the General Federated Women's Clubs decided that they were going to sell trees for $1 a piece. And they were so good at it, they sold trees they didn't have. Promise of getting trees and planting trees in Franconia Notch. They raised enough money, so they raised actually a little bit more than half the money that was needed to purchase Franconia Notch from the companies that owned it at the time. And that was one of the many projects that the GFWC took on over the years. My wife was a member of the GFWC for a few years. She was also the Sergeant at Arms of the House of Representatives for 10 years. And that's when she was in the GFWC. And I like to say that my wife is capable of doing everything except for the things she hasn't tried yet. And she literally became the first woman to go over the edge of the old man.
First of all, thank you for all the service, because I can tell you, growing up, my grandmother lived in Sugar Hill. I lived in Massachusetts. I would go through Franconia Notch multiple times a year, and always look forward to looking up and seeing it there. Unfortunately, my kids can't see it, but I wanted them to at least hear it from your perspective. But one of the things that I know when they expanded the road through Franconia Notch, I know that was something that was a concern for all the construction vehicles. Did that cause anything? Did you notice anything different during those years of that construction?
Actually, what happened was during that same time period, there was a group of scientists from Dartmouth College that wanted to measure the amount of earth movement happening. So we installed seismographs on Franconia, on that side of Franconia Notch. And we arranged for a demonstration one day from the crew that was blasting just below Profile Lake. We had determined a particular time they were going to blast, we were going to be on the mountain, we were going to watch the blast, feel the blast, that type of thing. So we were literally standing there with binoculars on top of the old man's head when, I don't recall what time it was, when the clock struck 11, and we looked down and we saw a little puff of smoke. And then you hear the report of the explosion. No movement whatsoever. The seismographs did not detect it. The seismographs were so sensitive they were actually capable of detecting earthquakes in China during their history on the mountain. So the blasting that they did never affected it. We had a chance to talk to the little man about this big, who was responsible for being in charge of the blasting, and he explained that he was given a range of pounds per square inch of explosive that he could use. He used 1/10 of that. He would rather do 10 blasts and cause no damage than have one blast and cause damage.
Right.
Plus, he had his ticket for South America in case something went wrong.
I got one.
Yep.
Kind of a two-parter. First of all, if you didn't catch it, his father's name was David Nielsen, which I think is one of the coolest, most New Hampshire names ever in existence. Can you tell us about the heritage of that? I know he had a pretty wild name.
My dad's name was actually Niels Friedman Fosberg Nielsen Jr. And it wasn't until he was older in life that he insisted on it being in print that way, Niels F.F. Nielsen Jr. His dad, of course, was Niels F.F. Nielsen Sr. When he named my father, changed his name to Fred. At that point in history, my father's father was Danish, having come directly from Denmark, and people as with people in society today, they have a tendency to pick on people that are not from their neighborhood. And when they moved here, they moved to Brooklyn, New York. My dad was born in Brooklyn, so that was why his father changed his name to Fred. But my dad insisted on keeping his full name, his land.
One more. What do you think people will say about all of this in 100, 200 years, or what would you want them to remember the most?
I guess what I want them to remember about the old man was that it represented the rugged courage that it took to create this landscape here in New Hampshire. That's why there's a poem, Daniel Webster wrote a poem that said, if men hang out signs that are indicative of their trade. A watchmaker, a giant watch, a dentist, a giant tooth. Here in New Hampshire, God Almighty has hung out a sign that says, here we make men. Of course, it's a little bit, you know, sexist, men, women, but given the time that it was written, I think that what he was talking about was mankind. What it means to us, what the old man means to us, and is the history that went into that whole process. You know, we believe that this is one of those things in New Hampshire that was created naturally, lived naturally, and we helped. The only thing we did was help it last a little longer. We tried not to do anything that changed its profile. We tried to do things that you did not see from the road. We tried to make it look and remain as natural as possible, and that's why we did what we did over all these years. Lastly, what I'd like to do is thank a good friend of mine, Randy Avery, who's standing back here with a little hat on. We work for Randy.